What if I told you that when Jesus spoke the words that would change the world, there was no Christianity, no church, no doctrine, no religion at all? Just a man walking dusty roads with his friends, saying things that didn't make sense to anyone until years later when they'd lived long enough to finally understand. This is the story of his very first teaching, and it might change everything you thought you knew. There are some words that live in us for years before we understand them. They arrive quietly, maybe in a conversation we barely remember, maybe something someone said when we were too young to hear it. And then, decades later, something shifts. The words come back, but this time they land differently. This time they mean something. This isn't a sermon. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. But I've been thinking about something Jesus said, one sentence that has stayed with me, haunted me really, in the best way. If you're in a season of your life where things feel quieter, where you're asking different questions than you used to, where you're wondering what it all meant, maybe this will speak to you too. There's a collection of Jesus' words called the Gospel of Thomas. It's different from the other Gospels, very different. Because here's what most people don't realize. When Jesus said these things, there was no Christianity. There was no church. There were no doctrines, no theology, no creeds. None of that existed yet. Jesus wasn't a Christian. He was a Jewish teacher, a rabbi, walking dusty roads with a small group of friends. He didn't have a religious system. He didn't have a denomination. He just had words, teachings, things he said while sitting under trees or walking along the shore or sharing a meal. And Thomas wrote them down. Just the words, raw, direct, before anyone turned them into theology, before anyone built a religion around them. This is what Jesus actually said in the moment to real people who were tired and searching and trying to figure out how to live. And the very first thing he says, the first teaching, goes like this: "Whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death." Imagine him saying that, not as the founder of a religion, not as part of some theological system, but as a man, standing there with his friends, offering them something, a way of seeing, a way of being that might change everything. What was he trying to tell them? What was he trying to tell us? When Jesus said interpretation, I don't think he was talking about figuring out the right theological answer. I don't think he was asking people to study harder or memorize better. I think he was talking about something else entirely. Because here's the thing. Jesus didn't teach like a professor. He didn't hand out doctrine. He told stories. He asked questions. He said things that made no sense at first. Things like, the last will be first, and whoever loses their life will find it. Why? Because he knew something we forget. Understanding isn't the same as information. You can know all the right answers. You can have all the theology memorized and still miss it. Still miss him. Still miss what he was actually pointing to. When he said, find the interpretation, I think he meant something deeper. He meant, become the kind of person who can hear what I'm really saying. Not with your head, with your life. Let me give you an example. Maybe when you were younger, someone told you, life is short. You heard it. You probably nodded. But did you feel it? Did it change how you spent your time? Probably not. Because at 30, life doesn't feel short. You still think you have forever. But then, something shifts. Maybe it's a health scare. Maybe it's losing someone too soon. Maybe it's just waking up one morning and realizing the years have passed faster than you thought, and time feels different now. Heavier, more precious. And suddenly, that phrase, life is short, it hits different. It's not just words anymore. It's truth. You didn't learn it. You became it. That's what Jesus was talking about. He wasn't asking people to decode his sayings like puzzles. He was inviting them to live into them, to let the words work on them over time, to become the kind of people who could finally hear what he'd been saying all along. And I think he knew, standing there with his friends, that this wouldn't happen overnight, that some of them wouldn't get it for years, maybe decades, maybe not until they'd lived long enough, lost enough, loved enough to finally understand. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't building an institution. He was just speaking truth and trusting that it would find the people who needed it when they needed it. Now the second part, will not experience death. And I want to be really careful here because it's easy to jump to religious explanations. But remember, Jesus hadn't founded a religion yet. He wasn't talking about church doctrine. He was talking about life, right now, today. Because the truth is, and Jesus saw this everywhere, you can be alive and still experience death. You can be breathing, walking, talking, and be dead inside. He talked about this all the time, actually, just in different ways. He talked about people who had eyes but couldn't see, ears but couldn't hear, people who were asleep, people who were buried in worry or fear or anger or the endless chase for things that didn't matter. He called them the dead, not because their hearts had stopped, but because they'd stopped living. Think about it. How many people do you know who've spent the last 20 years going through the motions? Who sit in front of the TV every night, not because they enjoy it, but because they don't know what else to do? Who avoid real conversations? Who stopped noticing beauty years ago? Who've built walls so high that nothing and no one can get in anymore? That's a kind of death, isn't it? I think that's what Jesus was talking about. He wasn't promising people they'd never physically die. Everyone dies. He knew that. But he was saying something else, something about now, about whether you're truly alive in this moment, about whether you're awake, present, here. And I think when he said, will not experience death, he was saying, if you really understand what I'm telling you, if you live it, you'll stop being one of the walking dead. You'll wake up. You'll start tasting life instead of just enduring it. But here's the hard part. You can't force that. You can't make yourself wake up. It's not about trying harder or believing the right things. It's about becoming someone different, someone softer, someone who's lived long enough to let go of the things that don't matter. And Jesus knew that takes time. He wasn't offering a quick fix. He wasn't offering a belief system that would save you if you just signed on the dotted line. He was offering a way of being that unfolds slowly, over years, through experience. Here's what I think was on Jesus' heart when he said this. I think he looked at the people around him, tired people, broken people, people carrying so much weight, and he wanted them to know there's another way to live. Not later, not after you die. Now. He'd watch people chase after money or status or approval, and he'd see them dying inside, slowly, quietly. And he'd want to shake them awake and say, "You're missing it. You're missing everything." But he couldn't force them to see it. He could only plant the seed and wait. And I think he knew, maybe more than anyone, that real understanding doesn't come when you're young. It comes later, after you've lived, after you've lost, after you've made mistakes and carried regret, and finally, started to let it go. That's when his words start to make sense. Not because you got more religious, not because you joined the right group, but because you lived long enough to become the kind of person who could finally hear what he'd been saying all along. Because here's the thing about aging that we don't talk about enough. It's not a curse. It's a gift. And it might be the very thing that makes Jesus' words finally land. When you're young, you don't need what Jesus was saying. You have energy. You have time. You think you'll figure it all out eventually. But as you get older, the world teaches you things. Gently. Sometimes harshly. You learn you can't control everything. You learn that people you love will leave. You learn that your body won't do what it used to. You learn that the life you thought you'd have isn't the life you got. And at first, that feels like loss. But then, if you let it, it becomes something else. You start to notice things, the way light falls through the window, the sound of birds, the freedom of an afternoon with nothing to do. You start to realize that the things you thought were so important, the arguments, the status, the needing to be right, they just fall away. Not because you forced them to, but because they stopped mattering. And in that space, something opens up. Maybe that's what Jesus was waiting for. Maybe he knew that his words would land differently in a 65-year-old heart than in a 25-year-old one. Not because younger people aren't smart, but because they haven't lived it yet. They haven't become it yet. And maybe, just maybe, that's when you stop experiencing death. Not because you joined a religion or believed the right doctrine, but because your spirit finally woke up. I don't know exactly what Jesus meant when he said this. I don't think anyone does for certain. But I think he was giving us an invitation. Not to a religion, not to a belief system. Just an invitation to sit with his words. To let them work on us. To stop trying to figure everything out and just be with them. Like you'd sit with a friend who said something you didn't quite understand yet. You wouldn't demand an explanation. You wouldn't try to turn it into a doctrine. You'd just think about it. Turn it over in your mind. Come back to it later. That's what Jesus was asking for, I think. So here's what I'd invite you to do. Sit with what he said. Whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death. Don't try to solve it. Don't try to make it into theology. Just hold it, like you'd hold a smooth stone in your hand. Turn it over. Feel its weight. Maybe write it down. Maybe put it somewhere you'll see it. Maybe just let it sit in the back of your mind as you go about your day. And see what happens. You might find it starts to speak to you. Not in words, but in moments, in small shifts, in the way you see things differently than you used to. Or maybe nothing will happen, and that's okay too, because I think Jesus wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't building an institution. He was just speaking truth, and trusting that his words would find the people who needed them when they needed them. And if you're in a season of your life where things feel quieter, where you're asking bigger questions, where you're wondering what it was all for. Maybe you're exactly where you need to be to finally hear what he was trying to say. Not because you got smarter, not because you believed harder, but because you lived long enough to become the kind of person who could finally hear it. If this spoke to you, please like this video and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you'd like more reflections like this, please subscribe. Thank you for listening.